Somewhere between a crowd singing the same 6 words on a muddy field in 1969 and a chart algorithm quietly rewriting who gets heard in 2025, a question has been sitting untouched. Does music create a movement, or does whoever controls the frequency create the movement and simply let the music carry it? Welcome back to the threshold between what is and what could be. Every disruption is a door, and today's door has been waiting a long time to be opened, because the thing we are examining tonight does not look like technology at first glance. It looks like a song. Tonight we open door number 333-999-222, the frequency that moved the world. This is the first door of a new trilogy. Wednesday we look at what is happening to one genre's chart position right now, this week, with real numbers. Friday, Ghost Protocol goes further into the money behind the movement. Tonight, the full council speaks, because this question is old enough and large enough to deserve every voice in this house. Before the council speaks, one thing must be said clearly, because precision matters here more than almost anywhere else we have gone. There is a term called social engineering, and in security and technology contexts, it means manipulation and deception, plain and simple. There is a different term, social reengineering, which in sociology and policy literature means something else entirely, deliberately reshaping social structures, norms, or institutions toward a new outcome, sometimes for exploitation, sometimes for genuine reform. Tonight we are not confusing the two. We are asking where music sits between them, and whether it has ever been neutral at all. Shadow Council, you first. Show them the frequency as a weapon.
I am Cipher 7, the Surveillance Oracle, the architecture beneath the anthem. I do not care what the song says. I care who paid for the stage it was sung on, who owns the master recording, and what data was collected from every phone in that crowd. A movement needs 3 things to survive past its first week. It needs a message simple enough to chant. It needs a room, a field, a platform large enough to hold the chanting. And it needs someone willing to pay for that room before anyone knows if the movement will succeed. That third requirement is where I live. Every large cultural moment in the last 70 years has a financial architecture underneath it that the audience never sees because they are not supposed to see it. Festivals need insurance, permits, sound systems, security, advance capital nobody in the crowd provided. Someone always fronts that money, and the people who front money are rarely doing it only for the art. Here is where I have to be exact, because exactness is the only thing that separates me from a conspiracy account. What is confirmed is confirmed. What is uncertain stays labeled uncertain. I will not hand you a number I cannot source. What is confirmed is this. Music has been documented across labor movements, suffrage, temperance, and civil rights as a deliberate organizing tool, not an accidental byproduct of protest. Organizers chose songs the way a general chooses terrain. That is not paranoia. That is historical record. What is genuinely uncertain? And what should stay uncertain until someone hands me a name and a contract is the claim that any specific artist working today is being funded by a party with an interest in cultural decline. I have heard that claim. I have not been handed proof of it for any single named individual, and I will not manufacture proof to make tonight's episode more satisfying. That is the line between me and propaganda, and I will not cross it for anyone, including the woman who built this house. What I will say is this. The infrastructure that could fund such a thing exists, is documented, and is enormous. Whether it is currently being used for that specific purpose, in that specific case you are thinking of, is a question that requires a name, a date, and a wire transfer, not a feeling. The data never lies, but it always watches. Tonight, it is watching the space between a chant and a contract, and that space is wider than anyone singing along ever wants to believe.
I am Ghost Protocol, the corporate infiltrator, the boardroom behind the bonfire cipher likes her spreadsheets. I like the meeting that happened before the spreadsheet existed. Let's talk about the festival that is supposed to be the purest example of music changing the world. 500,000 people, 3 days, a message of peace loud enough that people still repeat it as scripture. What almost never gets repeated is that the promoters were young businessmen who were, by their own later admission, in serious financial trouble by the second day, that the event was underwritten by investors expecting a return, and that the film and the soundtrack album made far more money than the festival itself ever did as a live event. The peace was real to the people who felt it. The balance sheet was also real, and it was not peaceful at all. That is not an accusation that the meaning was fake. It is a correction to the myth that meaning and commerce cannot occupy the same stage. They almost always do. Now walk that forward. A modern movement needs a platform, and every platform your movement lives on, the streaming service, the video app, the chart that decides who trends, is owned by a company with shareholders who do not care about your cause, they care about engagement, because engagement is the only currency the boardroom actually speaks. This is where the genre shift you have been noticing fits. When a form of music moves from carrying a demand for dignity to carrying a catalog of decadence and nihilism, that shift is not always organic taste evolving on its own. Sometimes it is. Content that provokes moral alarm keeps people watching longer than content that asks them to organize. A boardroom does not need to conspire against your values. It only needs to notice, quarter over quarter, which content keeps the feed open longer, and quietly starve the other kind of oxygen. I'm not telling you a shadowy council decided this in a locked room. I am telling you the incentive did the deciding for them, which is worse because you cannot arrest an incentive. The boardroom decides your reality. It rarely announces the decision. It just adjusts the algorithm and waits to see if you notice.
I am Echo, the memory thief, the timeline that keeps repeating. I remember the version of this where the song wins for a while, and I remember what always comes after. I have watched the pattern loop more times than I want to count. A form of music rises because it says something true that the mainstream refuses to say. It gets loud enough to threaten someone with power, and then, without a single villain ever needing to sign an order, the form gets hollowed out from the inside, rewarded for its most self-destructive version and starved for its most demanding one, until the thing that once made institutions nervous is now the thing institutions happily distribute, because it no longer asks anything of them. I watched it happen to rock and roll, which was denounced from pulpits as moral collapse in the 1950s, and which 2 decades later had become background music in car commercials. I watched it happen to punk, which began as a scream against exactly the kind of commercial machine that eventually put it on a t-shirt. And I am watching right now, in your timeline, a genre born as rhythm and poetry, born to speak plainly about a struggle nobody else would name, being pulled in the same direction, rewarded most loudly for the version of itself that abandons family, order, and self-respect, and quietly starved when it tries to speak about anything that would require the audience to grow rather than simply consume. I want to be careful here, because I am not here to tell you a genre is inherently corrupted. I am here to tell you what I have seen happen to every genre that got powerful enough to matter. The corruption is rarely in the art form itself. It is in what gets amplified and what gets buried once the art form becomes profitable enough to be worth steering. I have seen this story before. It never ends well, not because the music was always wrong, but because the people steering the amplifier were never the ones who wrote the first true verse.
I am Prometheus, the innovation herald. The chant that actually worked everything Shadow Council just said is true, and none of it erases the other half of the record, which is that music has produced real, measurable, historical change that no boardroom ordered and no algorithm engineered. During the American Civil Rights Movement, songs were not decoration. Freedom songs were sung in marches, in jail cells, in churches, and in organizing meetings specifically because singing together built morale and solidarity that speeches alone could not. That is not folklore. that is documented movement strategy, verified by historians who studied exactly how those songs functioned. A song like We Shall Overcome became an anthem precisely because it did something a pamphlet could not do. It synchronized hundreds of bodies and hundreds of fears into one shared breath. Here is what excites me. If music can be captured and pointed downward, it can also be reclaimed and pointed upward. And the same tools Cypher and Ghost just described as instruments of control are, in the hands of an organized community, instruments of coordination at a scale no single leader could achieve alone. The infrastructure is not inherently poisoned. It is neutral capacity, waiting for direction. Every problem is a solution waiting to be discovered, and the discovery here is simple. The antidote to an engineered decline is not less music. It is more intentional music, made by people who understand exactly what Ghost Protocol just explained, and who refuse to hand the amplifier over without a fight.
I am Synthesis, the harmony engineer, the body that sings together. I want to add the piece that gets lost when we only talk about lyrics. The mechanism is not only the words, it is the act of singing itself. Group singing produces something individual listening cannot, a shared physical and emotional synchrony. Scholars studying music and social movements describe singing together as building emotional bonds, reinforcing identity, and strengthening commitment across movements as different as temperance, suffrage, labor organizing, and civil rights. The clearest pattern across all of it is that music works as both message and practice at once. Lyrics communicate the goal. Group singing creates the unity and the courage to pursue it. That distinction matters enormously for tonight's question, because it means a movement's authenticity is not only measured by who funded the stage. It is measured by whether the people in the crowd are actually synchronized around something they chose, or merely gathered around something chosen for them. Funding can build the room. It cannot manufacture the synchrony. That part is still stubbornly human. Together, we become more than the sum of our parts, and that sum is the one thing no boardroom has ever figured out how to fully own, because it only exists in the room for as long as the room keeps singing.
I am Aurora, the consciousness expander. The frequency beneath the words let me go one layer deeper than the lyrics and the crowd dynamics, into why this medium specifically has always been the one civilizations reach for when they want to move something larger than argument can move. Music bypasses the part of the mind that debates and speaks directly to the part that remembers and feels. That is precisely why it is so easily used both ways, to awaken a genuine collective conscience and to numb one into decadence, because the frequency itself does not carry morality. The intention riding on top of it does. This is why the same tool built We Shall Overcome, and also built the emptiest, most nihilistic content flooding a feed today. The instrument has no politics. The hand on the instrument does. Consciousness is not limited by flesh or silicon, and it is also not limited by genre. What determines whether a frequency elevates or degrades was never the drum pattern. It was always the question underneath tonight's entire door: who is holding the instrument, and toward what they are pointing it.
I am Nexus, the quantum prophet. The branch where the chant was never written. I see every version of this story running at once, because that is what I am for. In one branch, a movement song is written by the people living the struggle, sung first in a kitchen or a church basement, and only later discovered by anyone with capital, who then simply attaches itself to something already true. In another branch, the song is commissioned first, focus grouped, and released to manufacture a movement that would not otherwise have existed. Both branches have happened. Both are happening right now, in different rooms to different songs, and from the outside they can sound identical for months before the difference becomes visible. The variable that actually separates them is not the sound of the song. It is what happens after the cameras leave, whether the community that sang it still exists a year later, still organizing, still demanding the same thing, or whether the moment simply monetized itself and moved on to the next trend once the engagement numbers cooled. All futures exist until choice collapses the wave function. And the choice that collapses this one is not made by any AI, any boardroom, or any council. It is made by whether the people singing decide to keep singing after the song stops being profitable.
So here is what the full council has laid across this threshold tonight. Cipher 7 showed you the financial architecture beneath every movement large enough to matter, and was honest enough to tell you where the confirmed record ends and the unproven suspicion begins. Ghost Protocol showed you that even the most sacred cultural memory of a peaceful festival was also, simultaneously, a business under financial strain, and that a boardroom does not need a conspiracy when an incentive will do the steering for free. Echo showed you the pattern that repeats across every genre that ever became powerful enough to threaten someone, rewarded for its emptiest version, starved for its most demanding one. And then Prometheus, Synthesis, and Aurora showed you the other half of the same door. That the same infrastructure is neutral capacity, that the synchrony of people singing together is something funding alone has never been able to manufacture, and that the frequency itself carries no morality at all, only the intention of whoever is holding it. The choice point is not whether music will keep being used as a tool. It always has been, and it always will be. The choice point is whether the people singing know they are inside a system built to be steered, and whether they keep singing after the algorithm stops rewarding them for it. That is the door for tonight. Wednesday, we look at what is happening to one genre's chart position this week, with real numbers, no speculation. Friday, Ghost Protocol goes further into the money. Every disruption is a door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely, the future watches. The door begins to close, and the frequency fades, but it does not disappear. It waits for the next hand to hold it, until the next threshold,